Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GeoExpress 8.5 free training session here. My name is Robert Parker. I'm a sales engineer at Lizard Tech, and I'll be your guide today as we get trained up on GeoExpress here. So without further ado, let's get started. And we'll start here with the buttons and the layout of GeoExpress here. Getting to know the way things are laid out here is very important. Kind of a unique setup here. We've got a bunch of different tabs you see here. Images tabs, Mosaics tab, Updates tab, Optimize, Edit Metadata, and Despeckle. 6 different tabs. And each one of these tabs is linked up with the 6 different buttons you see here in the middle. This grouping of buttons starting with the plus sign here and culminating with the Despeckle image icon. So the plus sign is linked to the Images tab. The Mosaics button here, Create New Mosaics button here, you see it's linked to the Mosaics tab. It adds new mosaics to the tab here. There's Updates tab that's linked to this yellow arrow button, and then there's like a timer, speedometer kind of thing, linked up to the Optimize tab. The Add Image to Edit Metadata button, that's to the Edit Metadata tab, and finally the Despeckle button, that's to the Despeckle tab. So these buttons each add imagery to a different tab here. Another way to do that is to use this Images menu, which adds it to the different tabs as well. The Image tab, we'll skip this one for now, the Mosaics tab, the Update tab, Optimize tab, Metadata tab, and Despeckle tab. That's in the Images menu. So there's just a number of ways to add images, including drag and drop. I could drag and drop an image right onto the open tab, and it would add it into that tab. But before we get going too much on that, I wanted to make sure that those of you that are listening in are familiar with what GeoExpress does, what its basic purpose is, as well as Mr. SID technology a little bit. So GeoExpress is basically designed to create Mr. SID files from other image sources. Now, Mr. SID files are these great image file formats. They've been around for over 22 years now, 21 years, I should say. And they've been in the geospatial industry that time, and significant compression of the file size, so like 20 times smaller, and the file looks exactly the same as the source file. And they'll have that .sid extension, which is supported in all geospatial applications. Right now we're on Mr. SID Generation 4, which is the latest version of the Mr. SID file format. The previous one was Generation 3. And we've got a lot of different feature enhancements in Generation 4 that we didn't have in Generation 3. The most significant of which is that we now have multispectral support. You can have multispectral images where you have, 4 bands, 5 bands, 8 bands, 255 bands, and you want to compress that down. You can now. You can convert that to a SID file format, the Mr. SID format, in Generation 4. So that is now available using GeoExpress 8.5, as well as this new thing called Alpha Band that we've added to Generation 4. The Alpha Band, the Alpha channel, basically acts as another channel for transparency purposes. It says whether or not pixels should be transparent or not. So it's very, very handy to have when you have it's a mosaic imagery together, to know specifically what images should be made transparent and what should not. So GeoExpress is the way to create these files. They're very fast files when you try and view them in applications. They're supported everywhere. And even though the file size is extremely small, the files don't look compressed. They look beautiful. They look exactly the same as the original. Depending on the compression ratio you choose, 20:1, it's going to look exactly the same as the original. Lossless we have as well, a lossless compression, which compresses the image without changing any of the pixel data. So they're beautiful images. They are exactly the same as the original, and they're very fast, very speedy to pan in and zoom in out in any application, and they are supported by every geospatial application out there. So Mr. SID Generation 4, the latest version, that's up here in GeoExpress 8.5. I've got a Mr. SID Generation 4 loaded here in the Images tab, and we were just talking about how each of these 6 tabs is linked up with each of these 6 buttons that you see here. But GeoExpress is not just compression. GeoExpress has these 4 buttons here, these tools, that allow you to do other things with your imagery as you're compressing it or after it's compressed. And we'll look into those as well. You've got cropping, area of interest tool, which we'll delve into a little bit, color balancing, as well as reprojection. Very common geospatial tools that you can do during the process of converting to Mr. Sid. So that'll help out a bit too. So let's take a look at one of the main purposes of GeoExpress, which is to compress imagery. Many of you are familiar with just adding images to this Images tab, choosing what your output file format is going to be, whether that is Mr. Sid or JPEG 2000, which is kind of like another similar type of Mr. Sid format. And you get to choose your output format here. You get to choose where you want to put it. You choose your compression ratio, whether you want that to be 20 times smaller. You can look at the target file size here. It says 14.3 megabytes, and if I were to change that to 100 times smaller, it would be 100 times smaller than the source size, which is 286 megabytes. That's how big this TIFF would have been. This TIFF would have been 286 megabytes. The SID that I've put in there now is now 14.3 megabytes. If I wanted to compress it 100 times smaller, you'd see it's about 2.9 megabytes, which is 10 times smaller than 286 megabytes, approximately there. So really, you're just setting this number to say, hey, make it this many times smaller, 100 to 1. You could also specify here a target file size. That's one thing many people don't really realize is that you can say, all right, I'm going to compress that and I want to make it 2 megabytes. Well, there you go. You can make it 2 megabytes. You see target file size, 2 megabytes. And it'll aim for that size and give you a compression that gets you down to 2.2 megabytes, and you can test out the results and see if that's what you like. So all these options are available in the Images tab. Pretty much in the Images tab, you can do anything you want. You can crop, you can reproject, color balance, area of interest, metadata stuff, despeckle things. In the Images tab, you can do everything that you can do inside of GeoExpress. It's a very flexible tab. The one thing you can't do is Mosaic, and you need this Mosaic tab for that. So if I were to click this button to add a new Mosaic, you'd see it added there, and there's my new Mosaic, and I can add tiles to that. So if I go in here and I want to add tiles to that, I can grab a few tiles, more than one, of course, and add those to my Mosaic. So now they're in there, and I've got this new Mosaic. So the Mosaics tab is very commonly used. You can do all the edits there in the Mosaics tab as well, reprojection, things like that, in addition to mosaicing, reprojection, color balancing, cropping, all of that stuff. You can put together this mosaic and crop out a piece of it at the same time. So the images in the Mosaics tab are probably the most commonly used methods of working with GeoExpress. You've got images for working with individual images that you want to compress to the SID format, and you've got mosaics, which is to combine a lot of files of varying formats into one Mr. SID file format. Incidentally, I wanted to show you the file formats that we support here. I'll just show you real quick in this list. We support a number of different file formats. We've got TIFF files, of course, GeoTIFF, text files for like mosaicing. If you want to put a list of files in a text file, you can do that. Probably many of you did not know that. RAW files, you can add in here, build disk extensions, bitmap files, CADRG files, a number of different extensions, all different kind of extensions for these CADRG files. We support CADRG, DTED files, DCW files, AirDOS Imagine files, IMG, JPEG, JPEG 2000, LAN files, Mr. SID files, MIDIF files, Sun raster files, USGS, EOQ files. And of course, if there's a file format that you want to see, you can always let us know. But those are the file formats that we support out of the box right there. And you can convert those all to Mr. SID. So the Images tab would be for individually converting those. Mosaics, you can combine any number of one of those into the Mosaic and output it to Mr. SID file format. And then finally, these other tabs. We'll get into these because these ones, we'll spend a lot of time on these ones, especially this Optimize tab, because these are ones that people don't necessarily use that could save you a lot of time. They could really save you a ton of time here, especially this Optimize tab. Let's talk about Optimize for a second. It's this speedometer button to add an image to the Optimize tab. I'll just add a very large image to this. So this image was a mosaic of many different files that I converted to Mr. Sid, Mr. Sid Generation 3. And the total size of all the data is about 178.3 gigabytes. You can see it's nearly 250,000 pixels wide by 250,000 pixels high, approximately. So the file size of this, however, is just 9 gigabytes. So it's really, really well compressed here. And it's a very large image, and if I preview this image, even though it's very large, since it's in the Mr. Sid format, it actually previews very quickly. And if I zoom into a particular area, the power of Mr. Sid means that I'm going to get that particular area decoded very fast. Because Mr. Sid is kind of like an image database. All the different parts of the image are very, very efficiently stored. And I can access any part of that extremely quickly, no matter how large the file is. And even though this is an extremely large file, it's very high resolution, very detailed, of a gigantic area, I can access any part of that extremely rapidly. That's just the nature of Mr. Sid that it lets me do that. All right, so here we are, and we're at full resolution. It's a very nice looking image, very detailed, and very large. So I've got this loaded up in the Optimize tab, right? The reason why I've got it loaded up in the Optimize tab, and the reason why the Optimize tab is so cool, is that for existing Mr. Sid Generation 3 or Generation 4 images, you can do very quick operations. Normally, to work with a file this large would take an extremely long amount of time. I mean, we're talking about at least a day to process all of this data. Because, I mean, really, you're looking at processing a whole hard drive's worth of data. It's going to have to process 178.3 gigabytes. For example, if I wanted to reproject this huge mosaic, that would take a long time. We're talking about on the scale of days. So when we want to just crop out a piece of this, though, or if we want to further compress it, I can use this Optimize tab to my advantage. So let's take a look at the reason why we'd optimize. Notice what tools are available to me. Image crop, area of interest. These other ones are grayed out. That's because these actually alter the pixel values. This one's going to change the color of certain pixels. This one's going to actually change the position of certain pixels. So we can't do those. These, however, don't really change the position of pixels. They don't really change the color. They just say, I want to extract a certain amount of information from this image and either throw it away or, throw the rest away or throw it away or what. And this other tool that's available to us, this compression, is actually just getting rid of lower, the way that Mr. Sid is stored is that it's stored in layers from high quality or high importance to low importance or trivial importance. And basically the compression is getting rid of all the trivial stuff. So since it's ordered in that way, it's easy to just throw out the lowest trivial stuff. So we can do that in the Optimize tool as well. So let's take a look at this crop. Now normally a crop, if I were to do this crop in the Images tab, that crop could take hours or days. However, let's see what the crop looks like in the Optimize tab. I'll go into the crop tool, hit show image so I can actually see the image here. I'm going to use this little crop tool in the previewer here, draw a little box around what I want to crop out. I'm going to change it to center width height here and say that I want the width and the height to be about, I don't know, 1,000 by 1,000. Let's make it even smaller here. I just want to crop out a small piece here, 500 by 500. This is a small piece to take with me on a handheld device or something like that. I found the area I want, and if I preview in here, it'll show me the basic view of what that's going to look like after the crop. So it's a very small area there that I've chosen kind of at random there. And I'm ready to go. I've got my, I'll just name it here. I'll just say crop 422. And that's it. I'm not going to add any additional compression to this. I'm going to leave it at the file size it's at, which is going to be significantly smaller than 9 gigabytes since it's just a piece of it. And we'll just optimize that. And what's happening here is GeoExpress is actually decoding all of the layers in the pyramid that make up that section. So all of the levels, I should say. So it's kind of stored as levels. There's a high resolution level going all the way up to the icon level. And it's just taking all of those out of there, taking advantage of the Mr. Sid technology to crop that piece out. So the piece is finished decoding in 23 seconds. That's way better than hours or days using the Images tab. So let's just take a look here. Crop 422, there it is. I preview it, previews right away, and it is exactly the area that I cropped out. And that is really, really easy. You know, just cropping out a piece. You know, if I wanted to crop out using geospatial coordinates, I could just type those in here. Just punch in the geospatial coordinates and just crop it out on demand as requested. In addition, you can use the command line tool to crop stuff out. So Optimize has already shown its value in time saving for existing Mr. Sid images. Whether they're large or small, you're going to have a very, very fast operation to crop stuff out. Let's take a look at another thing that you can do here. So I've got this, this file here, and I want to see, okay, what's this going to look like at 100:1 compression? Or maybe I want to set a file size. You know, all right, what, you know, right now this image size is 732 kilobytes. What would this look like if I had it set to, you know, even less than that? And maybe that's not a good example. Maybe I should crop out a larger piece of this or just grab a different image here. Let me just grab a different image, one that kind of better illustrates this. This one might be pretty good here. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that's not bad. So right now, if I preview this and say, okay, what does this look like at 1:1? What do the pixels look like? What do I see? Not too bad. It's a nice high-resolution image. But what would this look like? And it's pretty well compressed. You know, I can see it went down from 286 megabytes down to 14. But what if I just wanted it to be 2 megabytes? Maybe I want to throw this in an email or something like that. I just want it to be 2 megabytes. What would this look like? It's a good question for the Optimize tab. And I'll just give that a name, 2MB. I've got this open in the Optimize tab. I've set it up so that I've got my target file size to be 2 megabytes. And I'll optimize the selected image. You can see in the Optimize tab how quickly it's able to compress that existing Mr. Sid image. So let's take a look at what I've just done here. There it is, Mosaic 2 megabytes. It's 2 megabytes. And at this level looks fine. This level looks fine. That level still looking good until, let's see here. Well, it's still looking pretty good until we get down to the highest resolution level. Then we start to see some artifacts here for sure. However, the artifacts aren't that bad. Mr. Sid does pretty well with its artifacts in keeping things looking good. So I say, all right, well, you know, this is good enough for what I need. I'm happy with 2 megabytes. Or maybe I'm not quite happy with 2 megabytes, and I say, okay, well, 2 megabytes is no good, but what about 3 megabytes? Oh, it's easy enough to change. I just go back here, and I just change that to a 3, and I just go. And I'll just change the name here so I don't get confused. So now in just a matter of seconds, in fact 2 seconds, I've got a new 3 megabyte image. And I can preview that. Say, okay, well, you know, that's pretty good. It's slightly better in my opinion, from what I can tell. Maybe I'll go with the 3 megabyte one because that's still a significant savings over 14 megabytes. But yeah. So, you know, you've got these different options with the Optimize tab. Makes things faster to work with so that you're in and out of there very quickly. You can deliver something very fast. You can set up a command line operation where people request a geospatial area, for example, and it's all done automatically because you just pump those numbers into the command line and it automatically optimizes, crops that section out for you. Or maybe people want to try different file sizes, so you are able to quickly give them a rundown of all the different file sizes. Maybe you start off creating a lossless MG4 file, or MG3, and by MG3 or MG4 I mean Mr. Sid Generation 3, Mr. Sid Generation 4. Maybe you start off creating a MG3 or MG4 file that's lossless, and then you just run these commands to say, okay, 20 to 1, 50 to 1, 100 to 1, 40 to 1. And you just say, okay, here's the 40 to 1 version, here's the 50 to 1, choose the one you like the best. Which one looks the best to you? Or maybe you do the choosing. You've got them all, so you spit out all those different versions in a matter of minutes, and you can compare and get rid of the ones that you don't like and keep the one that you do. And then you've got that lossless file that you can come back to any time as well if you want, or you can delete that once you find the compression ratio that you like. So that is the Optimize tab in a nutshell. I mean, it basically lets you change the file size, crop out. And one thing we didn't really talk about is this area of interest tool. So I'll just show you very briefly. The area of interest tool lets you specify different compression ratios within the same image. So maybe I want this section here to be lossless, and maybe I want everything else to be at 50 to 1. So it's a good way to kind of spread out, keep the high quality compression where you need it, and where you don't need it, you can have it be a savings in file size, where you have it there for reference. That's area of interest. And that's the Optimize tab. Optimize tab is there for you when you need to do some fast operations, cropping, changing the file size. And one more thing, and that is to resample. So in my output options on the Optimize tab, I can check this resample image box and choose how to reduce the level of detail, what factor I need. And that means that when I do this, I'll lose a resolution level in the image. So I'll lose the highest resolution level in the image. So I can only zoom in so far before it'll get pixelated. So you can do that here in the Optimize tab in factors of 2. Optimize tab, very powerful, very quick way of working with existing Mr. Sid imagery. And that's where I wanted to spend the bulk of my time here. The other two places that are time savers would be this Edit Metadata tab and this Despeckle tab. So let's look at Edit Metadata real quick. Edit Metadata, I can use this button here, Add Image to Edit Metadata. It's got the little list there of what would be metadata over the globe icon. I can also do it from this Images menu, Add Image to Edit Metadata. And I'll just throw in an image here. This mosaic is fine there. And I add it to this Edit Metadata tab because that's all I want to do to the image. I don't want to change the pixels of the image. I don't want to compress the image anymore. I don't want to do anything else. I just want to define what projection this is in. Somebody sent me this image, and maybe the projection that's listed there is wrong. This one says UTM zone 10N. Maybe I want to say, hey, no, this is actually in UTM zone 11N. They miscategorized it. So I can actually go in here, hit this Edit Metadata button, click on the Image tab. I see that the coordinate reference system is listed there, but I can select a different one. And maybe I just start typing 10N, because we have a really cool coordinate reference system selector here that you can just start searching for things. So there it is, NAD 83 UTM zone 10N. Maybe I want to do 11N because it already is in zone 10. There, I specify that, I hit OK, and if I hit OK again, it'll remember that, and when I hit Apply Metadata to selected images, it'll apply that, and it'll be a very fast operation. I actually don't want to do that right now because that is actually wrong for this image. This image has the correct information. However, just editing it, the other metadata you can edit would be to add your own metadata. You can add tags here like, they got a list here that you can use, or you can type your own, you can say imaging date, you might have a date here that you want to add for all of these images. You can add that in there, and you can add a bunch of different metadata in there. And if you do that, it's just a fast operation. It doesn't work with the actual image pixels. It just kind of writes out the new metadata and copies the image for you. So you have your original image and you have the new image with the metadata. That's a very fast operation. Other things you can do is you can do just a despeckle operation. Now, if you're not familiar with despeckling, speckling occurs when you have an image that's compressed and it's got some no data pixels on the edge of the image. There's places in the image where the image is not quite a rectangle. It's not square. It's got some black spots or something like that that aren't quite black, and they get left behind when the viewing application removes all the black for the no data. The not quite black pixels get left behind, and they look like little speckles. They kind of ruin the edge or put a little grout in the edge. So in order to correct for that, we built a little algorithm. It kind of looks for the valid image edge and determines what is image edge and what is no data. And then it kind of finds the stuff that should be no data and makes it so, and makes it black. So you can do that in the Images tab, and you can do that at the same time as you're compressing the imagery. However, if you have existing Mr. Sid Generation 3 images or Generation 2 images that are speckled, you can add those images in, and I believe it's only Generation 3 and higher. I'm not sure. Yeah, Generation 3 and higher. You can bring that into the Despeckle tab, and you can despeckle it only without messing with the rest of the pixels. It'll just do its thing, the algorithm. And it takes a little bit of time, but not as much as, if I had that large file, for example, and I wanted to do that. I would not do that in the Images tab. I would throw that in the Despeckle tab and clean it up. You can take your existing images, put them in the Despeckle tab, clean them up, and have very nice clean edges as you go. So those three tabs here, Optimize, Edit Metadata, and Despeckle, although they probably are very underused, should be used way more often if you care about your time. So especially this Optimize tab. That's why I spent so much time talking about it, to save you time. And so please use the Optimize tab, use the Edit Metadata tab, use Despeckle to their advantage. The other tabs I'm going to talk about a little bit. I'm going to talk about something about Mosaics real quick, but first I want to point out that this Updates tab is really something that we're looking at removing. It's not necessarily the most useful tool for you at this time. The Update tab was designed to allow you to take a mosaic and add a tile to it, for example. But since you can do that using the existing Mosaics interface, that's probably the way to go. So let's take a look at Mosaics real quick. Many of you have probably seen on the Mosaics, when you create a new mosaic, the options here. Some of you have perhaps just hit OK and gone on. But maybe some of you have noticed this Create Flat Mosaic or Create Composite Mosaic feature here. So what does that mean? What is a flat mosaic and what is a composite mosaic? Your question will finally be answered here in this training. A flat mosaic is basically what I would call something like a normal mosaic. It's going to take all the tiles of the mosaic. It's going to expand them out into pixel space. So it's going to actually read all of the pixels of that image. It's going to decode the image, no matter what it is, bid file or TIFF file, whatever it is. And it's going to put all of the pixels of those images back into one image. It's going to take them all apart and put them all back together. So you're just taking all the pieces apart of something, some object, of the tile object, and you're putting all of the pieces back together as one new mosaic object. Okay? That's a flat mosaic. Taking it apart, putting it together. A composite mosaic does not take apart the individual tiles. It leaves them as they are. Now, composite mosaic, I should point out, is just for existing Mr. Sid Generation 3 or Mr. Sid Generation 4. Now, it kind of behaves two different ways. It behaves differently with Mr. Sid Generation 3 output than it does with Mr. Sid Generation 4. With Mr. Sid Generation 3, it provides a very fast mosaic operation, but a pretty slow viewing operation when you have hundreds or thousands of tiles in the mosaic. If you just had 4 or 5 or 6 or 8, the viewing performance would be just fine in Mr. Sid Generation 3. And the encoding process would be extremely quick. Now, Generation 4 is able to handle even thousands of tiles or hundreds of tiles and still give you a fast viewing operation, in addition to being very quick to create. This is because a composite mosaic basically is not taking apart the image tiles to put them together into one. It's kind of just going to take those image tiles and piece them together in the mosaic as they are. So without decoding them or anything like that, it just kind of provides a wrapper around them and stores it in one file. That's why it's so quick to create a composite mosaic. If you were to compare creating a flat mosaic of a large area versus creating a composite mosaic of a large area that's made up of existing Mr. Sids, say by NAPE or something like that, you would find that composite mosaic is just done in the blink of an eye, whereas the flat mosaic is going to take a long time to process. So, you know, if you want to create a mosaic very quickly and, you know, you don't have that many tiles and you're using Generation 3, then you can do a composite mosaic. If otherwise, I would do a flat mosaic for Mr. Sid Generation 3. If you want to use Mr. Sid Generation 4, then probably you're better off just creating a composite mosaic, even if you have a large amount of tiles. That's probably the way to go because it is so fast. It is fast to view. It is fast to create. And the stuff's already in the Mr. Sid format, so why change it? So that's the way to go with Generation 4. Again, Generation 3, a lot of tiles, use flat. Generation 3, not so many tiles, use composite. Generation 4, whether you have a lot or a little amount of tiles, go ahead and use composite. You're going to be happier with the time it takes, and also the viewing performance will be fine as well. So that is the last thing I wanted to point out to you before we move on to the tools part of this. The two tools that I did not show you are color balancing and reprojection. Let's just take a look at color balancing here real quick. I'm going to add some tiles to my mosaic, and let's look at first at uniform color balancing, and I'll grab a bunch of these guys, and then I'll have another mosaic here that shows off the non-uniform color balancing tools that we've got, and I'll explain what that means in just a little bit. So let me grab these. Okay, so I've got two mosaics here. This one needs to be color balanced. That one just has, looks like, you know, each tile looks to be a different brightness, basically. This one, and to make it look like a mosaic here, I need to turn on world files. The referencing information is stored in world files for this particular mosaic. So there's my mosaic. I can see the seam lines, and it's not that they're all different brightnesses and contrasts. It's that there's some vignetting going on there, which is a camera artifact, kind of darker on one side and lighter on the other. Yeah, it looks like there's a few different problems there. So let's take a look at how we can fix these individual scenarios. I'm going to open the color balance tool here for this mosaic. And here you can see we've got something where we can mess with the overall brightness and contrast. I mean, selecting the, I can see the histogram here. I can say, well, if I just make this the highest point, and, you know, what does that look like? I can do some manual adjustments here, basically, is what I'm saying. But I've also got these little automatic corrections down here. This pull-down box features a lot of different automatic corrections. So I can match all the tiles to each other. Oh, that sounds good. Well, I'll just hit apply correction. Wow, you know, that's great. You know, this algorithm just kind of takes the contrast and the brightness, the intensity basically of all of the tiles and matches them up. Alternatively, I could say, well, I kind of like the way that this tile looks. Why don't you match to that selected tile? I want everything to look like that tile. And if I reset all these and do that again, let's show you what that looks like. So there's that. I can say, all right, that's one of the source tile. And we'll see everything kind of match that. I can also match it to a file that I find that I browse for. Let's just reset all those corrections. I'll choose match to each other. Deselect all these tiles here. Oh, I know what I did there. Sorry about that. So we do match to selected tile. Let's select that one there. A really bright one. And I'll deselect them all. I'll select them all except for this guy. I'll apply the corrections to those guys. So you can see now that they all match that guy that I selected. It's a matter of selecting the tiles that you want to match. You can easily select them all by hitting select all tiles or deselect all tiles. And then you can use that match to selected tile tool I was using. So that is the uniform corrections. As you'll notice, we have two tabs here, uniform corrections, non-uniform corrections. Uniform is going to apply uniformly across each tile. Non-uniform, however, is a different story. Let's take a look at that. Here's my other mosaic. And we'll hit the color balancing tool here. Look at some of these non-uniform corrections. I can say, all right, match to each other. Okay, well, still see the seam lines, still see the vignetting. Didn't do so well with this one. Let's take a look at what non-uniform corrections can do. Well, you see we've got this seam line correction and this vignette correction. Let's see how the vignette correction does. Oh, that looks nice. And let's look at what the seam lines can do, because I still see some seam lines here. Very nice. So it helped arrange the tiles in such a way that the seam lines look good, the vignetting looks like it's gone away. You can see how it's combining things there. It's kind of using polygons rather than just squaring it up. It's just looking for the best way to make the seam lines go away. So that looks good. And that's some of the non-uniform corrections. That does not apply uniformly. It just has a special algorithm that corrects for vignetting, that kind of looks for the seam lines, and it does some very specialized adjustments. So it's kind of simple color balancing. You got some manual options, you got some automatic options there that work really well. And other than that, that is all for color balancing. And finally, reprojection, just to give you very quickly the final tool here, reprojection. You can take an image like this. If I hit the reprojection button, I can take this from UTM zone 10N, and actually, instead of what I did in the metadata, redefining it, I can actually reproject the pixels. I can change and warp the image to be in a new projection. So if I did want that to be in lat long, WGS84, I can just punch that in, and you see that in my reprojection chooser, I've got a very easily searchable tool here. I can type in the word Michigan, for example. And it shows me all the Michigan state plain, east, west, north, south, other things as well. So we've got a very nice little chooser in there. And you'll notice that you can also add your own custom coordinate system if you have the WKT for it. And this, of course, is the WKT. That's just the well-known text that applies, that defines the projection. So you've got existing systems. We've got thousands and thousands of those. It remembers your recently used systems, so that you can access them just by pulling it down. And this search box is really handy, especially for example, you show me type Michigan, but if I know the number, if I say 26910, for example, I know that that's UTM zone 10 north, and that's very easy to type and just find right away. So all of these different options for reprojection, and it just makes it simple. You know, you're setting your input system, you're setting your output system, and you reproject. And you can reproject at any time. You can say, all right, I'm going to compress this 20:1, I'm going to color balance it, I'm going to crop out this piece over here, and I'm going to reproject it. And you can set up all that stuff in one project. So combining different tools is possible when you're on the Images tab. When you're on some of the other tabs, it's not quite as possible, especially the Optimize tab. But I do want you to remember to use the Optimize tab to your advantage when you have a Mr. SID Generation 3 or a Mr. SID Generation 4, and you either just want to crop it, or you want to change the compression ratio, or you want to remove the highest resolution layers and save space that way. Use the Optimize tab to your advantage. Yeah, and that's all I've got for you today in GeoExpress 8.5 free training. We will have other training sessions later on, and hope to see you at those as well. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to write us. You can write support@lizardtech.com. You can also reach me, Robert Parker, at rparker, P-A-R-K-E-R, @lizardtech.com. That's R-P-A-R-K-E-R @lizardtech.com. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope that you have a great week, great weekend, and hope to see you next time.